Heavenly Father, we come before you this day, for you are the author and creator of life. Everything good and perfect has come from your hands, and we take a moment to acknowledge that. We thank you for the blessings of life. We thank you for the breath in our lungs today. And Father, as we approach this day with the difficulties and the challenges that our world is faced with today, we pray that you would give us wisdom. We acknowledge our need of you today, and that we need your help. And so, Father, as we look to help people on the road to recovery, give us your wisdom, give us your direction. We thank you for the leadership that is here, that has a vision to reach people. We thank you, Father, for the solutions that are in this room, and for each and every person, that we all play a role in helping people to recover and find a path to freedom. We thank you for this day, and we bless each and every person. We bless the food that we'll partake of later, and we thank you in advance for solutions that will help change the world. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, Pastor Nathan, for your service and your prayer this morning. Speaking of service, I would like to introduce now at this time Commissioner Nick Sherman. Commissioner, thank you for your service, your dedication to Washington County, and helping persons with recovery on the network. Thank you.
John, thank you, and thank you to the entire staff of the Washington County Human Services. I think you guys do an absolutely amazing job, and I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge them for putting this event together and all the work they did, so thank you for that. I just think this is an amazing event. I know a lot of you know me personally. I've walked around. I see you for 20 years before I was a Washington County Commissioner. I worked in human services with domestic abuse counseling, with underage drinking programs, and I did that with my sister Jody Sherman, who's here representing the Domestic Outreach Center. So I know she's always critiquing my speeches, so that's always adds a level of nervousness in front of you guys. But no, it's just so important. Washington County is one of the greatest places in the world to live, work, raise a family. I could have lived anywhere in the world when I moved from Mount Lebanon, and I chose to move back to Washington County. I'm so happy that I did so. Great economic development, great things in South Point, oil and gas industry, our casino that's printing money. There's so much good. The black eye for Washington County has been for a long time the opioid problems that we had, the fentanyl problems that we had, and continuing issues with drug and alcohol. And I know that there's so many people that started growing in the right direction. I think that, I'm remiss if we didn't talk about Gene Matone, who passed way too early and way too soon, and all the work that he did in Washington County. And, the black eye is that we had these issues. The good thing that's happening is we're changing the conversation from, the bad to Washington County as a drug problem to Washington County as an amazing recovery community and an amazing recovering county. And that's not by accident. That's because of all the people that are sitting here today that go to meetings, that pick up a book, and that make sure that they're working with people, sponsoring people, working in human services, working in drug and alcohol, having conversations. So today, I'm really, really happy to be here. I'm gonna turn it over to my colleague, Commissioner Larry Maggi, because I think some of you are getting PTSD. I know that you can't turn on a TV or pick up your phone without hearing a politician these days. That's going to end in about a week, so I do apologize you have to come here. I know it wasn't to listen to us, the politicians, but to listen to the service experts that we have here in this really, really good panel. We're going to continue to row in the right direction. We're going to continue to make sure that we're helping the people that need the most help with this tragic issue that we have by having conversations, by getting rid of stigmatisms in drug and alcohol. And so that's what this is about today. It's about everyone putting our heads together. Everyone in this room works in drug and alcohol, works in mental health in some way. And it's about having conversations, bouncing ideas off each other, and just making sure that we're doing everything that we can. I could not be more proud to have this Road to Recovery Symposium that we're doing today. Darryl Price, this was his idea from the very beginning, the County Chief of Staff. He does amazing work. So thank you, Darryl, for going above and beyond and facing this issue head on. We're not going to push it aside, not talk about it. We're going to make sure that we're having the, at times, difficult conversations, because we owe it to our children, we owe it to the people in society that are having issues to address them so they can live meaningful lives. So with that, I thank you for being here, and I introduce my colleague, Commissioner Larry Maggi.
Thanks, Nick. And again, I appreciate getting the opportunity. All I'm doing is going to make the introductions here, but as a a lifelong resident of Washington County and someone who's been in law enforcement for the past 50-plus years. This is not a problem that just started. It's been a problem for years and years, and it's great to see people like you in this room trying to make a difference and coming up with new solutions. Obviously, solutions we've used in the past have not worked, and it's great to see people in here with fresh new ideas and making a difference. So, to get on with the program, it was my job to introduce our speaker today, and our speaker today is Becky Garrow. Garrow is a resilient, compassionate individual, deeply dedicated to her role as a registered nurse and proud holder of a Bachelor's of Science in Nursing degree. As a mother of 4, including 1 child with Down syndrome, Rebecca is nurturing spirit and unwavering love which shine through all aspects of her life. Hailing from the Mid-Mon Valley region, Becky has overcome personal challenges with grace and determination, emerging as a beacon of hope for many and many. Her journey of addiction recovery serves as a testament to her strength and her perseverance. In addition to her professional and caregiving roles, Becky finds joy and fulfillment in her family life and cherishes moments spent with her loved ones. Her experience have instilled in her profound sense of empathy and understanding qualities that enrich her interaction with others. Becky embodies the values of resilience, compassion, and the unwavering dedication inspiring those around her with authenticity and warmth. Ladies and gentlemen, our speaker, Becky.
Good morning, everyone. I have been asked to read from the back of the pamphlet with the journals that are on your tables to thank you, everyone, for sharing your business and contact information so we can continue to work together to build opioid addiction awareness and continue to foster community engagement to address Washington County's addiction recovery. As a token of appreciation for attending the Road to Recovery, we would like to give each guest a recovery journal to share with someone you know that is on a journey of recovery. And I would just like to say that this may, to some of you, just seem like a journal, but to someone who's in recovery, this can mean everything. Journaling is a big part of my story. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. As I stand over there and think, like, that's not me. That's not me that he's defining. So I'm an addict, and my name's Becky. I have to introduce myself that way because I have to remember that I'm an addict first. And I've learned that through a long journey of pain and suffering in active addiction. And the only way that I can share with you how I've experienced Washington County's resources is really to share my story. This is not my typical audience. I don't own dresses or these kind of shoes. I wear Chuck tees and Vans and all of that kind of stuff with jeans and ripped t-shirts. So how Tiffany chose me for this is just mind-blowing because I am very raw and real, and if it offends anyone in this room, I do apologize, but this is my story and I have to share it because it keeps me going. So I have been a Washington County native my entire life. I was raised in West Brownsville until I was about 8 years old. I had a mom, a dad, a brother, parents had a business, but what happened is when I was 8 years old, my grandfather, my great-grandfather, both passed away within 6 months, and my mom and dad got divorced, so my life was ripped apart. My mom was broke, and she went to college. I had an older brother, he was 4 years older than me, and it was sort of burdened on him to watch over me, to be my babysitter. Well, we moved to the town of California, and the only thing in the town of California is a college. So I went from roller skating to smoking cigarettes on roofs from friends, which progressed to sneaking out and lying and all of those things. But see, my behavior started at 8 years old, way before the chemical ever was put in my body. My chemical was just my escape. And so it does progress. I did start by smoking weed and drinking on weekends. And it was always a problem that I can identify that because I could never stop. I did the most horrific things and wake up in the morning and have no idea how I did them, but they are certainly not the most horrific that I had done through high school. I managed to hold on to some, my mom was an educator. She was the superintendent of Jefferson Morgan School District. And she had fought my whole life. I was like at the expense of her being able to do for us and give us a life. And I didn't realize that until she was gone. But she was an educator, and she happened to work at the Votech that I went to. So anytime I missed school or my grades were bad, she got a phone call straight away. So I kind of held on to grades, and I always knew that I wanted to be a nurse. So graduate high school, go to Washington Hospital's nursing school, and then I meet a man. And I meet a man who had been to prison and for cocaine delivery and arson, and I thought that he was just so unloved, and he had just been left. And I was gonna like love him and fix him because that's who I am, is this loving girl. Well, of course, I quit nursing school, and I followed him right to the heart of Clairton. Now this is 1998, 1999. This is before the word heroin was ever really spoken in Washington County. I remember the people who were I remember like the junkies, the idea of what they looked like, and that wasn't me. But I went right to Clairton, and I did everything that everybody around me taught me to do, from stealing to lying, and of course that progresses and that gets more and more. But see, once I found the escape to those behaviors and those feelings that I had from that 8-year-old little girl, it's the only thing that mattered. I did a group yesterday at work on brain chemistry and addiction. And it explains how the drug becomes food, this basic necessity of life. See, that wasn't the education that I got then. I was just a piece of crap in the bottom of the barrel, and I had no hope. And it's changed so much. Because back then, you had to go, in order to go to treatment, see, the OxyContin era was how I got into the heroin. And back then, you were taught about this little orange drink. You go, and they take you off of it, and it was methadone. I had used for 4 months OxyContin, and I went straight to a methadone clinic. I did not know anything about rehabs or outpatient or treatment in any capacity because there simply were not those resources. Or maybe I didn't know them because I'm sure they were there. But I felt like a dirty little secret. And so I was at Progressive Medical in Houston. I did the program exactly as they said. I didn't use illicitly on top of it. And whenever I had come down in a dose, I had to go to Washington County Drug and Alcohol to be assessed because insurance didn't pay for treatment. You could go to the Drug and Alcohol once a year to get funded, but you had to have an appointment, and then they had to make you an appointment at rehab. So for addicts, they had to know they wanted to get clean like way ahead of time. And unfortunately, I left. It was Greenbrier that I went to. And I left 3 days in because I ran into a girl and a friend, and I went on the run, and I continued to run. Until in 2003, a judge decided to stop me by putting me in jail. See, all of this that you see up here really is not who I still kind of see myself as some days. Because I remember the person that I have been. And so I went to jail, which isn't fun. And it really wasn't fun as this young girl who had no idea what she was really getting into. This guy said, go steal those checks, and I did. Because the only thing that mattered was the food that I needed to eat to be able to be okay. So in 2003, I got out of jail. I went to what was called a Suboxone clinic. I was in the first trial maintenance program of Suboxone, where the doctor dosed you in his office, literally came in and put it under your tongue, really having no idea what the effects were. And at the end of that month, I had it used for 1 month. He said, hey, do you want to try this maintenance program? Well, I'd been on methadone, so I understood what maintenance was. I stayed on Suboxone for 5 years until I tapered all the way off of it. And in that time, I had had theft charges, so I couldn't go back to nursing school. So I worked in pizza shops, and I lived a normal life. And so for 13 years, I didn't put illicit substances in me, but I still drank. And for me, for myself, a 12-step program is the only thing that has brought me to the place that I am today. I had taken the principles that I had learned from intermittent moments in a 12-step fellowship, took what I thought applied, and threw the rest away. For 13 years, I lived with raging character defects. I married a man who I thought was, going to be the love of my life. 6 months after I met him in Jamaica, I went to nursing school at Washington Hospital. Right before graduating, I find out I'm pregnant with my first child, who is born with Down syndrome. Didn't matter. I didn't feel it. I did not feel it. I shed tears. People saw tears stream. Thing is that I didn't know how to feel because I never knew who I was. I never knew how to identify my feelings because I don't have an identity. I identified myself as the people that I was surrounded with, which was always a man. And it really goes back to the 8-year-old girl whose every male influence in her life disappeared. That's what 25 years of research and trying to get clean has taught me. So I have pregnant with my second child. I graduate nursing school. I go to Cal U. I obtain my bachelor's degree in nursing. I get a job at Jefferson Hospital. And the thing is that my ego was bigger than this entire place because I did not know how to look at me and the problem, which is my thinking and my patterns. My mom was diagnosed with endometrial cancer. Didn't feel it, didn't matter. We did chemo, we did very extreme measures. She had multiple bags keeping her alive until the end. But see, Claritin and Jefferson Hospital are just a hop, skip, and a jump away. And before I knew it, before I thought about what was happening, I had heroin back in my hands. And this is when really the story begins for me. I was robbing my mother blind on her deathbed, and she wouldn't put me in jail. I stole everything that I possibly could from her. The bank came to the hospital and told her it was up to $25,000 a few days before she died. So when my mother was dying, I added cocaine to the mix so I didn't miss her death, because that's the only rational thought I could have. How do I miss this? And when she died, the first check I got was $95,000. And I spent the next 4 months in the room that she died in, essentially trying to kill myself. At that point, I have 2 children. I have a husband's using, but I really didn't have anything to do with them because I just wanted to die. I had nothing to live for. Everything that I defined myself by died with my mom because I'd also defined myself for her. Everything that I aspired to be, I did because I wanted to please my mother. But I also blamed her for everything from the time that I was little. We become quite complicated, don't we? And so I got on methadone again because I didn't know what else to do. And then I decided to be late for court, which, Judge, I'm sure you can attest to that's not looked upon great. But I was late the second day when they gave me a chance, and they put me in jail. And I came off of methadone on the floor of a jail cell. Now, this was Allegheny County. I don't know, besides Warden here, who's been in Washington County and seen Allegheny County, and they are 2 different worlds. And I was thrown straight to the wolves on a cold concrete floor, feeling like I'm going to die and wanting to die. I got out, I used Suboxone because it's prescribed. It wasn't prescribed to me, but it was prescribed. And then off I go again, because the first time I use, I don't have a choice, because it then immediately becomes that food that I need to survive, that my brain tells me. In December of 2017, I found out that I was pregnant. But you see, I had a heroin habit of 50 bags per injection, probably 5 or 6 a day, and a quarter ounce of cocaine, IV, a day. $1,500 a day for me. I got $600,000 inheritance from my mother. That was her retirement, that she had fought her entire life to be able to leave me, and I put it all in a needle and a lawyer, because then I had big cases. I had been put on probation for a DUI that I had, and I was given the probation officer, Heather Testa. For those of you who don't know Heather, she's pretty serious about her job. And I just couldn't fiend her. I could not get over on this woman for anything. She put me in jail. I don't fiend drug and alcohol to let me out in 2 weeks because I know the talk. I can talk the talk. I can put the mask on and I can be what I need to be. Washington Drug and Alcohol lets me out after 2 weeks with outpatient. I go back to jail. Constables have to come and get me. Sheriffs need to take me to the hospital in Pittsburgh because I'm pregnant using. It's a horrible thing for me to say that I did. But it's not who I am. But it is most certainly something I have done in active addiction. I could not care about the baby moving in my belly. I didn't even care about me. I don't even know who I am. Well, when I woke up in the hospital the next day, there was no sheriff at the door, so I ran. Then I'm on the run from Washington County, and I'm on the run from every county, and I lived in cocaine psychosis for about a month and a half, where I believe that there is an implant in my husband's ear, a woman under the car. I ran from Penn Highlands Mon Valley Hospital with a book bag while he was being seen in the ER from the shadow people, because they were really coming after me. Fell down a hill, did all kinds of stuff, and then I ran into Heather Testa. Boom, she got me. When I walked into jail that time, I was like, thank God. It was Allegheny that picked me up, and I was so grateful to be in that hell. Because I couldn't stop. I had to be stopped. I spent the next 6 months in Washington County Jail, and I was on methadone. And so being on methadone and pregnant in the jail, I had to be segregated because you can't be with the regular population, at least at that time. I don't know if it's changed. And so I lived in the clinic, which is 2 cells, and a day room and an outside space, which is not very big. And every woman that comes into the jail is housed there. And so there was never a cell I had. There was never anything like that. But I had methadone and I was okay. Judge Gary Gilman gave me opportunities to get out. He released me on house arrest. I get out, my husband's using, I'm back in a week with another charge. Go back in front of Gary Gilman again. I have a gag 1 and a gag 2 in the same day. Not heard of, I'm special. Because I think I am. I think I'm something. He tells me, I'm going to let you out the day that you're having your daughter. Go over to Washington Hospital, you're going to have the baby. If you can find a rehab to take you on 110 milligrams of methadone, I'll let you go. Heather wanted me to do 90 days in jail, 90 days and a half, like the whole pilot program, and start all over again. I said, okay, Judge, thank you. I used in between the jail and the hospital. We don't have a choice once we're going. CYS came in, husband was there. He was falling asleep because it's cocaine, you can't stay awake. And so CYS didn't even, there was no thought. My sons had already been placed with my mother-in-law. I put them there. I thought I was being like a good mom. I don't want them to see me get arrested. With no insight into how I'm not. Do that in the first place. So my daughter was taken, I had a C-section on October the 17th. On October the 18th, Washington Drug and Alcohol had a liaison that comes into the hospital. Her name's Jennifer Cease. who came into my room because, see, I had been beaten, I had been broken, I was desperate, and I did not want to do what I was doing anymore. But I didn't know how to stop. And Jen looked at me and said, I'll help you. And that moment was the moment that I became a human again. Just for a second, one little blip. And she found me a rehab to take me. I would have went back to jail, no methadone, no pain medicine from a C-section, and I would have been on the floor of a cell wanting to die and probably would have tried. She found a rehab for me. SPHS Center of Excellence had Joe Pagano's name on a receipt that came for a bus ticket. We would go to Bowling Green Rehab on the other side of the state. And days after it's my third C-section, and I'm black and blue from here to here on a bus. But see, I still hadn't had insight yet. And God had a plan for me that I didn't know existed. Because I took my will back over and over and over again, and he said no. I was held over in a snowstorm in Baltimore. Judge Gilman told me I was on zero tolerance, no more Becky. I held over in a snowstorm. I missed court in Allegheny County. I ended up sitting in Allegheny County for a week, which then made me violate Washington County's zero tolerance for not reporting. I walk in and they take me to jail. I self-reported, but I hadn't used anything other than methadone because I knew I'd go to jail. There was no desire. It wasn't like real desire. There was desire there, but desire plus opportunity is that moment that Jen Cease said, I will help you. Was my moment. That human-to-human connection. I was no longer just a piece of shit. I have no idea where I'm at on time, Tiffany. I didn't have to be a piece of shit. She gave me hope. One person. There were many, many, many people along the way. There were many that tried. It just happened to be in the moment I was ready and willing to accept being a human again. So I ended up back in Washington County Jail for missing that bus. I ended up coming off of methadone on the floor in the jail. And I, of course, think I'm something special. And those of you who think there's not stuff in jail, there is, absolutely. I smoked a cigarette on Christmas Day because I thought I deserved it. It's Christmas. Shouldn't be in jail on Christmas. Should be closed. It's like everybody's holiday, you know? So I went to the hole. And I go into a cell that has nothing in it. I'm withdrawing from methadone, so there's no sleep, and there is a King James Bible, and there is an NA basic text. I don't want no parts of the blue book. And King James gets really hard to read all day long. The genealogy, I had it written on with pencil, drawing it on my cell wall because I still didn't want to face me. And there's this little broken mirror in there, and I caught a glimpse of this face. And there's nothing else there. There were times that I felt more free inside of a jail cell than I did out because I was protected from me. That's why whenever I get out and I get to take the wheel back and I'm not controlled, I don't know what to do. Heather knew that. Oh, I hated her. Oh, I so hated her. I call her every year on my clean day to tell her thank you. Because she just wouldn't tolerate my bullshit. Heather wouldn't let me out of jail, so I found a home plan. Washington County Drug and Alcohol comes into the jail again and sees me. And they set me up and they fund me to go to a 3-quarter house, Power Resurrection House, in Washington. Washington is this huge recovery community that I had had experience with in the past, but I had become quite resentful to it because that guy that I followed declared and decided to sleep with a bunch of newcomers. And I thought that was a 12-step fellowship's fault. Anybody to blame other than him. And so then I had to walk from Res in December or January of 2019. I'd walk from Res all the way over to SPHS Care Center where I received drug and alcohol, mental health, and I had to walk to meetings, and I had to walk to the grocery store, and I was so grateful to be out in that cold because every day that I walked past the jail. CYS Justice Works came in. They helped me get visits with my daughter immediately. For the first time in life, I went straight from jail into the CYS office and said, "Hi, I'm Becky. I know what I look like on paper. You've never met me, and I'm not that person, and you're going to see." And that was ego, and that was pride-driven, and I was spiteful. I stayed clean. I was spiteful for heaven. My clean date is very, very, very much court-ordered. My recovery is not. So it is possible. Now, over the course of the time that I spent in Washington, I ended up getting kicked out of res because I was going to meetings in Charleroi. That's where I was going back to. I got kicked out. I went and saw my new PO, who was Nate Sorelli. And Nate said, "I'll let you go home, Becky." I had house arrest to serve, and I got to go back to Charleroi. But I had just this conversation. "Nate, I really haven't used drug testing. This is why. But I'm so afraid of that. I'm so afraid of confrontation, of facing anybody that can hold that over me." But I did it. I had courage to. And he helped me. And then I had Kyle Kohlbacher. And Kyle helped me. And CYS helped me. And I continued then care with SPHS in Menneson. See, but Justice Works had to come pick me up. I did drug testing 5 days a week for CYS. They had to come pick me up in Charleroi, drive me to Washington probation, to drug test me, to take me back home, and they did it to help me get my daughter back, that my choices, my actions had given up so freely. I dove into the 12-step fellowship, and my clean date is December the 4th of 2018. So God willing, this December the 4th, I'll celebrate 6 years clean. I got my nursing license back. I went through PNAP program. I forget the name of the agency in Washington. Helped pay for it. Helped pay for my drug testing. I got a job at Greenbrier as a nurse. Joy was my director of nursing. She wasn't that at the time, but she taught me, her and Tiffany taught me that I could be me as a nurse. That it was okay to be me professionally. I'm not professional. The F word comes out of my mouth way, 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 way too often. Surprised it hasn't yet up here. I think it's because there's a judge sitting next to me. I still figure it out. And I got to get involved. And Greenbrier helped to guide me in showing me that I could mold myself into who I really am, because it didn't need any molding. It needed the mold broken off. I had to dig down deep and find out who I am. And I learned that through the 12-step fellowship and by following others that have done what I'm doing today. I've had the opportunities that it's unbelievable. A new recovery unit had opened at Penn Highlands Lawn Valley. It's 10 minutes from my home. I am a Valley girl. I am a Cali Valley girl through and through. And that was near and dear to my heart because I've been at that hospital so many times and been treated so freaking bad. When somebody hates themselves and they're treated more worse, they just believe it more. It just keeps us from seeking treatment. That's all it does. Compassion fatigue is very real. And I hid from that as a nurse. I never owned being an addict. And I've been taught through Greenbrier and at Penn Highlands. They have this, I'm a part of this team that is like trying to change the stigma of addiction and change how we treat people. Recovery is not what I say it is what you say that you're willing to do, and we're going to meet you where you're at and do whatever we can to help you. with so many resources that I have been introduced to. It blows my mind. The Johnson Shaw Foundation just goes and gets people's birth certificates and helps to guide them on their road to entering the workforce. I've seen every facet of resources in Washington County. If I have not named them, I promise you I have probably encountered them. And depending upon where I was spiritually was whether or not I was willing to accept the help. But I promise you that everyone has that moment where opportunity and desire meet, like it did for me with Jen. And now I get to work with her. And every time she calls, it blows my mind that I was just this girl 6 years ago in a jail cell, children placed everywhere, that I could be asked or desired or thought I could come and speak to a bunch of people that I really hid from and have something to share. Before I came up here, my boss, Kelly, said to me, "I'm so proud of you. This is what you were meant to do." See, because I struggle with speaking to audiences like this, because what if I relapse? Am I going to be that face that then you guys say, "See, she didn't do it, she didn't make it"? I've seen it happen. And so I struggle with that anonymity piece of it. But because professionally, I get to do this at work and say to somebody who's struggling, "I promise you can do it," and I'm not fired for holding their hands. Standing very firmly on the hard boundary, not to cross it, which I try to dance upon still. I'm so blessed. My life today is something I never dreamed possible for me. And it's because of the services and the resources that were available to me to have that connection in that moment when I was willing to accept it. So thank you to all of you for continuing to fight for us, for people like me, because I promise I was that woman that nobody thought was going to get it. She's not. I'm just going to be dead. I was okay with that. We're not afraid of death. We hate ourselves because we don't know who we are. So I encourage you all to continue your efforts, going from where the beginning, where you have drug and alcohol could only fund you so often, to where we are today. We have to keep doing it, because there are so many people out there like me that deserve that one chance. I thank you all for your time and your attention.
Well, when you hear Becky, it makes me think that some of the stuff that I'm going to be sharing with you today pales in comparison to some of the things that she's experienced. But knowing just a little bit about what each of you have experienced also is important. The idea of opioids. Everybody in this room probably has your own story, either what you've experienced or vicariously. Somebody you know. I've got my own stories. In addition to being an academic at a number of institutions for probably the last 30 years, I'm a pastor. I've been a pastor full-time for 40 years, I would say. I get it. At least I think I get it until I encounter another situation. My experience with drugs and alcohol as addictions goes back at least 40 years now. People with whom I've worked with, some folks I've buried. Some of the stories have been tragic. And again, all of you probably know your own parts of those stories, your own perspectives. Before we started today, I was talking to one of my spiritual daughters. Only three of us in the room know this particular young lady. But over 20 years ago, she was drug trafficking, interstate drug trafficking. I really didn't know her then. I had taught one of her siblings in public school when I was a public school teacher many years ago in the New Kensington area. And I got the story about this young lady only when she was in prison. At one point, she was the youngest prisoner in Muncie State Prison. I went to see her. Deacon and I were having this conversation earlier. You see, I believe that when God positions you for something, He opens the door for you to deal with folks. I became a part of that young lady's life back then. She was in Cambridge Springs Prison. Her father had approached me outside of a local hospital. He said, "Would you visit my daughter?" I said, "Who's your daughter?" He told me her name, and I said, "Well, where is she?" He said, "My wife and I are taking care of her baby." He said, "She's in prison." I said again, "Where?" He said, "Cambridge Springs." I said, "Where's Cambridge Springs?" He said, "Up by Meadville." I said, "Oh, I went to undergraduate school at Slippery Rock. I know where Meadville is." When I showed up at the prison, as I have encountered this in both male and female prisons over the years, I wasn't in the computer. Yes, they had computers in those days. And I looked at them and I said, "I'm Dr. So-and-so. I'm here to see this particular person." And the officer at the front door of the prison said, "But you're not in the computer." I said, "I'm Dr. So-and-so, and I'm here to see this young lady." They let me in. People aren't usually trying to break into prison. They let me in. She said, "How did you get in here?" See, I understand this, that God places people in our lives at some of the most critical and pivotal times. Sometimes they're angels unaware that the Bible talks about, and we don't know who they are, but God places them in our path. I work with young people in a number of high schools in Beaver County and Allegheny County and Washington County and Westmoreland County. One of the things I tell the young people is, don't let the way that I enunciate my words fool you. Don't let the way I drive or how I dress, don't let that fool you. I said, I'm very street smart, and anybody who knows me knows that I am. How does one become street smart with all of the academic credentials? You've got to roll up your sleeves, and you've got to get with those folks who need you the most. How many of you know what I'm talking about today? It's not us. As I was preparing over the last week or so for this, I thought of a situation of a person who was over a particular Christian ministry. I won't say what the organization is because some of you will have heard of that organization. And the CEO said to me one day, he said, "Mitch, did you ever think that you would be dealing with those kinds of people with a PhD?" I was like, "What?" He said, "Did you ever think that you would be dealing with those kinds of people with a PhD?" I had to tell him again what the Bible said. To whom much is given, much is required. Why wouldn't I deal with all kinds of people? Our calling in life is to deal with people who have all kinds of problems. Doesn't matter. We're not better than they are. We somehow escape those kinds of situations. But most of us have people in our families who've encountered that. That young lady from prison has been out of prison for more than 20 years now. She's facing major surgery this afternoon, so she'll get a call from my wife while I'm still here to have a word of prayer with her. She understands. She never got back in once she had gotten out of prison because I became her dad. She had a father, but I'm dad, and mom is over to my right. Her birth parents are now deceased. We are her parents. You all understand the importance of having somebody who can stand with you as you go through all of the things in life. That's who we are to a number of people. She was only one of the persons that I thought about. I remember leaving my area, which was the Alakiski Valley, heading toward Pittsburgh to IKEA to pick up something one day. And as I answered my phone on Route 28 going south, this mother was screaming on the phone, screaming. I said, "What's going on?" And all she could blurt out was her son's name. He had overdosed. And they found Paul dead. I turned around on the highway and I went to where his apartment was. Of course, I couldn't get in because the police needed to survey the area. But Paul was gone. While my wife and I were in the mountains of West Central Virginia back in May of this year, I got a text message about 3 o'clock in the morning. I rolled out of bed and went into the living room in the condominium. And I called the person I said, tell me what's going on. And she said there were 5 people that were together. And all 5 overdosed between that Sunday night and that Monday morning. All 5. Only one of them remained dead after that. The boyfriend, they hit him 10 times and brought him back. He's still dealing with the trauma and the responsibility that he feels was his, because now his child's mother is no longer here. I can go on with stories, but it's all about perspective. If we talk about the statistics, we all should understand, I mean, they're prescription opioids. As I looked at the list, I said, oh, I've had some of them, but they've been prescribed. It's not all the illicit drugs that people wind up giving themselves to. Sometimes it's the prescription stuff, whether it's oxycodone or hydrocodone or morphine and codeine and fentanyl and methadone. Those are just a few of the names. But somehow people can come up with stories and get access to that. And again, I'm only trying to give perspective so that we understand that it's readily available if somebody wants it. My wife had major surgery early this year, and I didn't think she was going to make it. One day, one of my kids said, Dad, I was doing some consulting work. She said, Dad, they think Mom has had a stroke. There's Mom over there. Wave your hand, Mom. No stroke. Stuff happens. I had major oral surgery about 5.5 months ago. The drugs they gave me, I mean, they gave me a bunch of stuff. I mean, I had some of the stuff on this list, but I saw certain names of certain drugs. I said, oh, I'm not taking that. I'll do the best I can. I've never been addicted to a drug, but I've heard the stories, and so some things I said, oh, I'm not touching that. They said, but it's there for you. I said, I'm not touching that. See, if you've never had an addiction and you've been able to control yourself, somehow we've got to somehow wrap our heads around the people who could not refrain from taking certain things. The illicit drugs, heroin, illegally produced fentanyl. Those are things that have been around. I'm from a particular area. I'm older than I appear. Usually when I see that, younger people start smiling at me like, really? Yeah, I'm 72 years old. Who said home? Your new friend. My new friend from Murraysville. We have to teach people how to take care of themselves. But I'm from the era, and a few of you may have come through that time in the 60s. Any 60s people here? Am I the only one? A few people. I mean, they had the drugs back then too. I mean, you talk about people going to Vietnam, but during that same era, all the psychedelic drugs, people dropping what we call acid and things like that. People just frying their brains on all kinds of things. So drugs is nothing new. I thought it would be interesting, and again, some of you from your experience would probably know this as well, if not better than I do. But what are the symptoms of an overdose? With a woman in our church, older than I, who recently overdosed on a prescription drug because she didn't read the information carefully. Oh, she didn't die. But if a person is overdosed on any kind of drug, these are some of the things that you can absorb. Cold, sweaty skin, tremors or shaking, trouble breathing, difficulty speaking, unconsciousness. And one of the things that didn't surface in the research was death. Again, a lot of people don't make it when they overdose because there become complications with other things that they may have in their system that are perhaps prescribed medication. If we talk about the history of opioids in the United States, and I'll spare you of that, we're just a country that has a lot of issues with a lot of the drugs that I've talked about. Or if we look at Pennsylvania, the number of overdoses just during the year 2022, there were over 5,000 people that overdosed just in Pennsylvania. The primary one was fentanyl, the one that comes from wherever, but as you know, can take out a person in less than 60 seconds. When you talk about Washington County, and I heard one of the commissioners talking about Washington County today, I find it difficult just to talk about Washington and Washington County because it's a tri-state area. You're so close to other counties, but you're also close to West Virginia and to Ohio. And I would assume that there's a lot of trafficking that goes between the counties and between these states. One of the key things, again, is fentanyl. It always seems to surface somewhere as one of the key opioids that people get involved with. In Washington County alone, and again, that's been alluded to some degree, key challenges: opioid overdose, mortality rate, elevated compared to the state average. Key challenges: limited access to treatment facilities, high fentanyl presence. And again, we're talking Washington County. Local initiatives, and I'll touch on some other things, but the idea of naloxone distribution, addiction treatment support. Some of this data comes from the Pennsylvania Department of Health and HHS. It's here. And the question is, what will we do? But there's also some myths that go along with opioid addiction. One of the myths is opioid addiction only affects certain demographics or is due to moral weakness. That's a myth. It doesn't matter what your neighborhood is or what your education level is. Your socioeconomic status does not make you immune or people in your community immune. Sometimes they just think, oh, it's just where those black people live. Oh no. When you begin to look at the research, you find out that oftentimes people from affluent neighborhoods, people of the upper echelon, they have greater access. I used to watch them drive, and Dr. V, when he talks later, he's seen some of the same things. It's like, well, what are these kids driving through certain parts of town with really nice cars? Because they're coming in and they're a part of that whole movement of drugs. Another myth, that prescription opioids are safer than illicit drugs. It's just a myth. Or that people with opioid addiction could quit if they had enough willpower. That stuff works on you in such a way that it takes away your willpower. It takes away your ability to think clearly. It takes away from who you are as a person. That you heard Becky talking about it. Sometimes you don't even know who you are anymore. Another myth. Overdose is only a risk for people who use opioids recreationally. Really? But then there are also some myths about opioid recovery. Let me give you just a few. Medication-assisted treatment, MAT, simply replaces one addiction with another. It's a myth. Or once someone is in recovery, they're cured. I'm so happy Becky talked about that today. Because one of the things is to also know what your baseline is, to always be aware of where you've come from so that you don't go back to that particular place. Another myth about opioid recovery, that relapse means treatment has failed. Not necessarily so. Most of you in this room probably have stories of people who relapse, but if we can get to them quickly, they've got a chance to begin to believe that they're still on the right road. Or another myth about recovery. That recovery is only successful through abstinence. Not necessarily so. And I'm going to spare you a lot of the statistics in the interest of time. If you know somebody who has an addiction, the impact upon their families is almost inexplainable. They've burned so many bridges. Nobody trusts them anymore. They've taken from their families. They've done things that if their families knew it sooner, they would have perhaps asked them to leave a lot sooner. There are situations that I'm aware of that because people use illicit drugs, in our family, there was a person out of state who was on drugs, I think pretty much whacked out of her mind one night, and she's getting revenge for her sister, and she's having a shootout on a major highway in another city. She has spent most of her life, over 20 years now, and drugs is the base of it. She's clear thinking today, but on that particular evening, drugs took away the clarity of thought. The impact on families is emotional and psychological strain, financial burdens on families, child welfare issues, caregiver responsibilities, social stigmas. And again, most of us in this room are blessed that we can go home at night. But anybody who's involved in this, and I know it from a ministry perspective, it's 24 hours a day. Anybody who needs my phone number can have my phone number if they have to call me. 24 hours a day. Because see, addiction doesn't work between 8 and 4.
That's the truth.
And 9 to 5.
That's the truth.
Okay? And I understand I'm not here to throw any aspersions at anybody because that's what your typical work hours may be. But those others of us in the room who are dealing with people's lives, it's accessibility. It could be just having somebody at the other end of a phone 24 hours a day that can somehow curtail the possibility of that person going too far in that particular experience. What does it cost? It impacts families in terms of interpersonal relationships. Well, how do I know this? Because, well, you know, I've been like some of you with people who have gone through things, and let me tell you this, even though some people think that people who are addicted just want to be addicted, if you really get them to have an honest conversation with you, they don't want to be addicted. It takes a lot from them. So how do we address these kinds of things? And Washington County commissioners should be applauded for the work that you're doing to try to make sure that hopefully we become a model of what other counties can see how it's being approached and the kinds of efforts that are being put forth, that we don't write people off. You say, but you don't live in Washington County. But I'm involved in a program, a prevention education program in some of your schools here in Washington County. Talking to black kids and talking to Asian kids and talking to kids who are Hispanic in your county to make sure that they understand that they've got some choices not to engage in certain types of behavior. It has a social economic impact. And again, it doesn't matter where you've come from. Maybe it's a wealthy suburban community. The drugs don't care. Maybe some middle-class professionals. The drugs don't care. Or maybe some rural, low-income populations. The drugs don't care. They're looking for any way that they can get into our communities to somehow disrupt what we think would be a normal lifestyle. And the young adults and college students to somehow prevent them from becoming everything that they could become. Yeah, the drugs are on probably every campus. It doesn't matter where your kids go to school. The drugs are there. If we look for stories of success, again, the one young lady, that's one. She's no longer trafficking. For more than 20 years now since she's been out of prison. Never went back to that lifestyle. I remember talking to her probation officer years ago. He said to me, he said, I would be out of a job if I had more people that I had to supervise like that young lady. I said, what do you mean? He said, she does everything she's supposed to do. I wouldn't have a job if everybody that I dealt with in parole was like her. And again, more than 20 years later, she's been clean, doesn't sell drugs, and let me tell you what, here was another myth that I've encountered over the years, that people who become incarcerated, because I think one of the people on our panel today is the director of probation. Here's what I've encountered going in male and female prisons and running programs in prisons for more than 20 years, I would say. Is that people who wind up in prison think that their life is over. That particular young lady that I've been making reference to legally made over $100,000 working last year. It's a myth for people to think that once they've been arrested and once they've gone down the wrong road that their life can't be. We are the people who have to communicate to them that their life is not over. They can have true success. There are drug courts. There are reentry programs. Some of them are a part of the Opioid Settlement Fund that your county has access to. Some RFPs that have been written. But we have a call to action. To celebrate those who are in recovery today is part of the story. To reach the people who have not come to the table for some kind of a program, the work is not done yet. We still have a lot of responsibility. There were two men that I thought about as I was preparing to come to you today, and some of you may have read about them over the years. One guy's name is John Stuart Mill. The other guy is Jeremy Bentham. They were contemporaries years ago with something called utilitarianism. Part of our ploy is to do the greatest good for the greatest number of people. That's what those guys believe. And that's why we're doing recovery programs and encouraging people to do the right kinds of things. The idea of community education and awareness programs, prescription drug monitoring programs, medication-assisted treatment programs, and again, some of what I've carved out, school-based prevention programs, to get to young people before they really start exploring and experimenting with drugs, so that they understand how it can alter what would have been an otherwise bright future. And we cannot do without community support and recovery networks. Who is most affected by opioid addiction? Again, this is perspective. It's individuals of all ages, all races, socioeconomic backgrounds, though some groups are more affected than others. In the United States alone, based upon the research, people aged 25 to 54 are at the highest risk. With a rise in opioid-related deaths among people of color and rural populations, families and communities are deeply affected as addiction often strains relationships and finances and emotional well-being. This whole problem has grown beyond the late 1990s. It is prevalent no matter where you look. Washington County is only one of the places that people can be affected. So I encourage all of you today to continue doing the great work that you're doing, because there's some lives that we can save if we do this work together. Thank you. One of the quotes that I saw as I finished today, every accomplishment starts with a decision to try. The idea of encouraging folks, don't give up, keep going. I'm not sure if I'm introducing Dr. D at this point. Dr. Bonzel Wade, gentleman to my right, I told him I was just going to make this up. Wave your hand so that they know who you are. A lot of people call him V. I have known him for decades. Even back to the time he was a basketball player in high school. He reminds me of that from time to time. But when you hear him as your moderator today, here's a guy that has more than just a PhD in counseling from Duquesne University. Here is a guy that people probably wrote off because he has drug background. He knows what it's like to have been arrested. But he and his lovely wife, now about 30 years approximately, have been free from drugs and alcohol. Graduate of Duquesne University, Seton Hill College, and he and I have our own experiences with Seton Hill. And if he wants to tell it, David, that's up to him, but the experience is basically where he had gotten knee surgery, got injured. And he couldn't figure out how he was going to get to Greensburg, to school. I mean, he's not a little guy. And I looked at him, and I said, how are you going to get to class at Seton Hill? He says, I don't know. I said, I will use one of the church's vans, and I will drive you. He said, but that's your time. I said, I'll take something I can work on. This is why we make investments in people's lives. Would you give God a hand?
I want to say thank you so much to Dr. Nichols and Rebecca. They did an incredible job sharing their passion and dedication to channel awareness for recovery. So let's all just give them a hand. This passion that guides our county leadership. This is vanguarded by our Commissioner Nick Sherman, Commissioner Larry Maggi, and Commissioner Electra Janis, who is not in attendance today, but she sends all her well wishes and support for these endeavors. So these are truly the type of opportunities that we very much gravitate towards to help weave the social fabric of the community and redefine the paradigm of recovery. And that paradigm of recovery, I'm very proud to state and honored to be a part of a county that drives faith. And in that, I would like to introduce Pastor Joey, who is Pastor Nathan's husband, or excuse me, wife. She's going to be guiding us in prayer for the lunch buffet that we're going to soon be partaking in. So Pastor Joey, if you could join us up to the front, thank you. Guide us in a prayer of thanksgiving for the opportunity for all of us to connect as we walk through this recovery. Thank you, Pastor Joe.
Absolutely, and thank you. What a beautiful morning, a celebration of hope and coming together. So let's pray as we enjoy some food and some conversation around the table. Father, we thank you for the opportunity to join together, to bring hope to a community, to bring restoration to the purposes and plans of the lives you've created. And Father, we just pray that you would bless this food, nourish it to our bodies for strength. And Father, be in our midst as we talk, as we have ideas, as we bring hope to one another. In Jesus' name, amen.
I do identify as a person in long-term recovery with over 33 years of continuous recovery. People usually clap when I say that. My pathway has been complete abstinence. However, I embrace all pathways. As a matter of fact, I talk more and deal more in terms of wellness than anything else. So very pleased to be with you here today, and big hand to everyone who was involved in putting this on. I know as someone who puts on events that it's not easy, so they deserve a hand too. So we have this panel up here who I just met. I went down the line and introduced myself to them. They all seem pretty friendly. I told them that all the questions they thought I was going to ask, I've changed them. That's okay. But this is really a great way to get a discussion going amongst the panelists as we set out to do what we do on a day-to-day basis in what I call the helping field, right? And so the purpose really is just to get their expertise and share some of these questions that I'm going to ask them, and your purpose is to listen. Can you do that? All right, cool. So what I'm going to do to kick this off is, I'm from Westmoreland County, so I don't know hardly nobody here, but you might know them, but this is more so for me. I want to have the panelists, and we're going to start with you because you had your hand up.
Okay.
All right. Introduce themselves and really just share your role, and we'll go on down the line, and then I will start the conversation off. Can we do that?
Sure. So my name is Cheryl Andrews, and I'm the Executive Director for Washington Drug and Alcohol Commission. It serves as the single county authority for Washington County, and basically what that means is that we hold the contract with the state Department of Drug and Alcohol programs to operate case management, treatment services, prevention, intervention, all things drug and alcohol throughout the county. So that's who we are, Washington Drug and Alcohol Commission.
I'm John DeSalle, and one of the judges in Washington County, and I'm the treatment court judge. I'm in charge of drug treatment court, or our restrictive treatment program, DUI treatment court, and mental health court. And I'm also co-chair with my colleague Cheryl Andrews on the Opioid Overdose Awareness Coalition for Commission in Washington County, where we focus on prevention, awareness, education, prevention, and reducing stigma.
Hello, my name is Scott Berry. I'm the Mental Health Director for Washington County Behavioral Health and Developmental Services. I specifically oversee crisis, emergency, and disaster services, but do a significant amount of work with law enforcement, also on the Opioid Coalition, and also working with EMS responders, first responders, and things of that nature as well.
My name is John Ridge. I'm the Probation Services Director. Probation Services in Washington County is housed under the Judiciary. We manage adult community correctional functions, pretrial, drug testing, house arrest, the juvenile division, which encompasses leader program, jobs program. It's a fairly robust piece of the criminal justice system. And obviously, a huge part of individuals being initiated into recovery.
I'm Patrick Arena. I manage the Murphy House, men's three-quarter house in Washington. I've been managing that for 9.5 years. I'm still sane, some days. And we have figured out that we have serviced about a little bit over 300 men in those 9 years. And not all of them have stayed clean and sober, but quite a few have. That's it. Thanks.
Hi everyone, I'm Justin Deary. I'm the director at Greenbrier Treatment Center under the GRC family here in Washington. It's a 76-bed inpatient and detox unit. I oversee the programming and the clinical staff, and we do amazing work. I'm super proud of our program, and I think the work that we do in Washington County is really important. And I'm also in recovery myself, so I just wanted to put that out there to everyone that I was it's like the hair club for men. I'm the CEO, but I also a client. Because I was a patient twice at Greenbrier too, so years and years ago. So I very, very passionately love that program and the work we do.
Hello, I'm Dr. Tom Perosco. I'm the Chief of Emergency Medicine Services at UPMC Washington and UPMC Green. Very honored to be able to speak in front of this amazing group today. Dr. Wade said that, we're the experts. I look out and see all you people and I think you're the experts. I'm just here to help tell you what I do and get some clarity on what we can do to make things better. I I did have the experience of working at Greenbrier Treatment Center for 3 years as a physician. So that was a great part of my career, and I really enjoyed doing that. So thank you for having me.
Hi, I'm Cheryl Demela. I'm the COO of SPHS. We do cradle-to-grave services across Washington County. More specifically, I oversee the Center of Excellence for Opioid Use Disorder, which is through our outpatient site at the Care Center, which does mental health and drug and alcohol treatment, as well as I oversee all the housing services in Washington.
I am Tim Noka. I'm a deacon in the Diocese of Pittsburgh. So Washington County is one of 6 counties that we serve in addiction recovery ministry. As a deacon, I'm assigned to addiction recovery ministry. We've been around for about 5 years. Obviously trying to bring the spiritual component to recovery. And within that, we do many different services for people and for their families. It's wonderful that the Lord called me to this before I realized that my son, who we were convinced had mental health issues, also had addiction issues. So I come to this also as a dad.
Hello. I'm Ashley Adams. I am a nurse practitioner with Crossroads Treatment Centers. We have addiction medicine outpatient centers across 10 states, and we have over 15 centers here in Pennsylvania. So I work as a provider at 3 of our centers, 2 of them in Butler County and 1 in Mercer County. So I'm a Butler County resident myself, but I'm also one of our lead practitioners. So I oversee our providers across most of Western Pennsylvania, and that includes our centers here in Washington and Kingsburg. So thank you for having me today.
So the opening question is going to be for you all. And don't be shy that the water's cold, but once you jump in and swim around, you'll be okay, okay? So here's the first question. And this is for the entire panel. What do you believe is the most significant barrier to recovery in your specific area of expertise? What do you believe is the most significant barrier to recovery in your specific area of expertise?
I think that the is stigma. So I think people choose not to access services or reach out for help because they're afraid of what the community, their friends, and then most importantly, what they really think of themselves.
I was actually going to say the same thing. I think it's far deeper than we realize sometimes, because the stigma is internalized by the individual that has the substance use disorder. It keeps them out of treatment, but it also continues to hamper them even in recovery. And speaking as somebody in recovery, there are certain rooms that I'm in this position and past positions where I'm not so willing to bring that up. And I think that speaks volumes. I'm the director of a whole facility, and I still feel that stigma sometimes, because it's internalized, and it comes from years and years of abuse, self-abuse, and then societal stigma as well.
And I was going to say stigma, but I'll change my answer and go to maybe my number 2. And I think some of it has to do with actual policy itself and policy makers, people who have that authority to create the policies. A lot of times they think maybe we know what's best for the treatment recovery community, and sometimes it ends up hindering our efforts in moving forward. And an example of that is how in the past, not so much today, but how specific the funding was. So we could use it, excuse me, we could use it for someone who maybe had an opioid use disorder, but not someone using cocaine. So we're freeing that up through education, but I think we as part of the field need to do our part to educate the policymakers so that it's more advantageous for those trying to seek recovery.
I would also say, in regards to what Cheryl's saying, is that it, sometimes the rule makers, if you will, They believed what's best, as she said, but it also sometimes hinders our ability to work together. You have multiple agencies, programs, and so on from here, and those things of the past would keep us apart. And we've been working very strongly to be able to bring those agencies, those programs together, as well as working with the legal system and the courts at that point in time also.
We see in the court system too, where we have someone with a co-occurring disorder using a drug use disorder, a substance use disorder, and some kind of mental health issue. And from my perspective, I think that nearly everyone in my program has some degree of co-occurring disorder. They may not have a diagnosis, but there's something that's driving them to numb themselves with substances. But we have this internal battle where you got to treat them for the drugs and alcohol first and get them cleaned up before we can treat the mental health. And we go back and forth, and it just doesn't work that way. And it's gotten a lot better in the last few years. And we're working much better working together and recognizing that. I would also say, by the time they get to my program, we're kind of beyond the stigma because they have charges and they're up against it. They're in jail. They want to. This is their path out of jail. You have a choice: either go to prison or come into my treatment program. So that kind of loosens up that stigma and that gives them a better alternative. And of course, our program, the treatment court program, is designed to, rather than warehouse you, lock you up. That's very expensive too. Those incarceration dollars could be much better spent at treating the underlying issue that got you into the criminal justice system. And that's why we also call our treatment courts problem-solving courts. What is your problem and how do we solve it? And if we can work on that, we can get you back out of the system, hopefully never to return to the system and be productive. And I did want to address stigma too. It's definitely a barrier. It's a barrier for people that, unless they're in jail, which is its own stigma. Whether it's mental health or drug and alcohol, we're reluctant to seek treatment. We're reluctant, like Becky, to admit that we have a problem. And even not only the internal part, but as a community, and with all due respect to Commissioner Sherman, this isn't a black eye. This is something that's happening in every community, in every county. Any county or community that thinks they don't have a drug and alcohol or opioid issue is not facing the reality. And it's all walks of life, and it's across all professions and across all socioeconomic statuses, or whatever the plural for status is. I'm sorry.
You just said it. You said it very well.
I think we should look at it as a blue ribbon, that we have a great recovery community in our county, and we're all here to address it and keep working on these issues and problem solving. So we have to view it in a positive light. I always tell the people that come in front of me, we're going to turn this negative thing, you got arrested, but now we're going to make that a positive thing. You're going to get into treatment and you're going to turn your life around.
Awesome. My colleague and a couple of his colleagues did a study specifically in the state of Pennsylvania where they had over 10,000 participants, and it was around stigma. And one of the questions on the study was, would you be okay with someone who identified as being in recovery being your neighbor? 84% said no in the state of Pennsylvania. So we definitely got some more work to do in that area. Did you have your hand up?
Yes.
Come on with it.
I want to answer the question.
Yes.
The biggest barrier that I have seen is the disease. We have a disease. And everything comes from that. You can ask the person, well, why did you relapse? It didn't make any sense. And their answer is always, I don't know. it's the disease. So, and there's a lot of subcategories under the disease, like mental health, self-respect, self-loathing. And there's a lot of, this is so complicated that the disease is cunning, baffling, and powerful. And, you know, we're lucky to, when we get sober and clean, we are lucky. We are lucky that that happened to us. So, you know, my answer is the disease itself.
Thank
Are we going in order, or how does this go? I don't want the end of the table to get left out, Doc.
you. No. I assure you that you will have plenty time to shine. I will come down that and on the next question. So we're going to go back and forth, but we don't have to go in order. But can you be polite enough to take turns?
I can do whatever you want, Bob.
All right, you're up next. Go.
All right, thank you. Well, and mainly, I just wanted to say, I'm surrounded by doctors down here, so I'm a little intimidated. I don't want these guys to miss out on their chance to talk.
Social worker.
I wanted to say, in relation to stigma, and I hope I wasn't too rude, but I do think this is an important point when I'm working with families. Stigma, shame, you know, whatever, that's the answer to the question, assuredly. But, you know, in ministry work, you always want to be pointing to Christ, right? And so one of the things that I try to point out to families to make sure that they're aware, if you've ever heard the term stigmata, there are certain saints that have had the stigmata. Literally, they live with the wounds of Christ, the 5 wounds of Christ. And that takes you back to what Christ had to take was basically stigma. And he got those wounds not because of anything wrong that he did. He got those wounds because he loved. And so any of us that love someone that is battling this disease has to deal with that stigma as well. And it holds them back from healing just like it holds the person back from healing as well. So if you just kind of twist that, somebody said let's look at it from a positive perspective. If you twist it and turn towards Christ, those wounds are no longer with him. Now they're scarred. He is healed. So as we turn to Christ, our stigma gets healed as well. Just wanted to make that point. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to shift a little bit. I'm coming to our medical right now. So Dr. Carrasco, did I pronounce that right?
Yes.
And Dr. Ashley Adams, did I pronounce that right? This is for you two. What are some of the challenges you face when addressing co-occurring disorders in a medical setting?
So I would say right now, one of the biggest challenges that we're facing in dealing with patients that have opioid use disorders is the co-occurrence of stimulant use disorders. It has been more prevalent than we have ever seen. So patients that are struggling with methamphetamine use, cocaine use, and that is very difficult to treat in patients that also are using opiates. And unlike opiate use disorder, in which we have some medications that are FDA approved and we know can be extremely effective to help them, we just don't have that in our arsenal to help patients with stimulants. Additionally, sometimes, we have patients that are presenting to us for treatment for opioid use disorder that don't necessarily want that same treatment for stimulant use disorder, but we know the dangers associated with it, and we do have a duty to help educate there. Another significant problem that we are seeing is the contamination of the drug supply. So sometimes patients, believe they're using a stimulant, and oftentimes we are seeing the contamination of fentanyl and other contaminants within those stimulants. So that has been a significant challenge. Another thing that we're seeing right now that is making our care significantly more challenging has been the introduction of other substances into the opiate supply, non-opiates such as veterinary tranquilizers. So we are starting to see xylazine specifically that has shown up a lot more in our testing. So that has been very complicated. There are a lot of medical issues that go along with xylazine, such as the skin lesions and more, that our patients are dealing with. The other really scary thing with xylazine is, of course, it is not responding to Narcan because it is not an opiate. It is within a different drug class. So there has been a lot of education efforts on our part to make sure that our patients are understanding the risks associated with this. So I would say those are some major challenges right now.
Awesome. Dr. Ashley, the next time you gotta speak up just a little louder, because I got an old guy over here, Dr. Nichols. He can't hear. I told you. All right, right, but thank you. So if all the panelists, if you could sort of project your voice so everyone could hear it nice and crystal clear, okay? All right. Dr. Peraska, you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, sure. Just last week, there was a party going on, and we had 3 patients come in overdosed on what was said to be heroin. The one patient took 24 milligrams of Narcan to bring back. I mean, 2 milligrams is what people give initially, right? To 24, that patient needed to be intubated, went to the ICU. The other patient took 20, did better than the other. But what our patients are injecting, they don't know. So that's been our biggest problem right now, and it's scary. It's very, very challenging. So we just do our best to support them and get them back. That's a huge challenge for us right now. The other challenge, just being in the emergency department, is time. If anyone's ever come to Washington Hospital or any emergency department, you often could have 15 people in the waiting room. You could have 20 patients waiting to get upstairs for beds, and then there's the rest of the people that you're trying to get to as fast as you can. So in a perfect world, I'd love to be able to sit down with my patient with that substance use disorder and spend some time talking to them. I don't have that. And that's where I rely on our teammates and partners with Crisis, SPHS, our social workers at the hospital. And so I look at time, that's very, very important to me and my team. The other thing is when we have patients come in that did overdose or asking for help, there's a finite window of time that we have to get to those patients, because that's when they're asking for help. If I can't get someone to come in for 4 hours, that patient's not going to be there in 4 hours. They're leaving. So the timeliness of getting those patients when they really want the help is extremely important. So a lot of challenges, but I see, this is a great intervention today to see all this communication to make these things better. So thank you.
Awesome. I want to shift just a little bit here. I'm going to come down and direct a couple questions around residential, inpatient, and sober living, if I may. And this is for Justin. Where's Justin? Raise your hand. There he is. All right, Justin, this one's for you. What are the key differences? Because I don't want to assume that everybody in here sort of knows this, nor am I here to insult anyone's intelligence. So if you could take time to explain what the key differences between inpatient treatment and sober living, and when it comes in terms of supporting long-term recovery. Could you explain that to us?
Insurance pays for treatment and it doesn't pay for sober living. That's the one big one. So with residential treatment, it is a living environment and it's residential in nature as far as how we treat the patient. So it's not just the clinical intervention, it's also the expectations of the program. So getting up on time, going to eat on time, meeting with the doctor when you're asked to go meet with the doctor, keeping your area clean, very basic life skills stuff is also part of residential treatment, not just the clinical intervention. And they're seeing a therapist daily, they're having individual sessions weekly, they're having group sessions with a small caseload multiple times a week, they're having large groups, psychoeducational groups, all of the myriad of different interventions that we utilize for substance use disorder, all empirically based. And all of that is covered by insurance under the level of care that we are, which is a 3.5 residential treatment program. Now we will oftentimes transition folks who complete treatment with us into a sober living environment. And the benefits of that are, when you get completed with your treatment, you get your certificate and you tap you on the head with the magic wand and tell you that you're completed and you're cured. That's not true, right? I mean, any other disease, cancer, diabetes, anything like that, you get follow-up from your doctor. You get follow-up from a nurse calling you, checking up on you, making sure you're filling your medications and taking your medications properly. And recovery it's just as if not more important to have that support. So in a sober living environment, and I'm sure you can speak a lot more to this, making sure that they're staying up on those community-driven coping mechanisms and recovery tools and relapse prevention tools that are available to them that we work with in a residential setting to get them set up with on that path, and then in the sober living environment, the idea is that they could have some more accountability and have some more support central to where they live.
Thank you. Thank you. This next one is for my two Cheryls. Raise your hand. There you go. What initiatives or strategies are in place to increase access to recovery services, especially in underserved populations?
Making sure that we're not missing the underserved, whether it be LGBTQI, different ethnicities, to make sure that if we are underserving them, we're going to develop a plan to make sure to access them and make sure that they know that the services are available. African American population access our services the least, even though in the Medicaid world they have a higher rate of having Medicaid. So it's about like 2% is accessing services when 20% have Medicaid. So we should probably see more rate of that specific underserved population accessing our services. I think we work together as a team across the different providers. I think I work in a lot of other counties and appreciate that the different providers, whether we're competing with each other or not like services, we're really working together and coming together. And the coalition that they have in this county really speaks to that. And I'll just follow up with the coalition. So the Opioid Overdose Coalition that is in Washington County, we collect a lot of data. We have a strategic plan. We're in our third 3-year strategic plan. So we've been at this for like nearly 9 years. But the data is driving a lot of the initiatives, a lot of things that have changed from maybe 10 years ago to today is, and Becky mentioned this when she spoke, like if you, 10 years ago, you had to show up at the office and you had to have an assessment done in that office. Now we're everywhere. We're in the communities, we're embedded in the hospitals, we're embedded in the schools, we're embedded in the courts. So we have more exposure to expressing and telling people that there's help available for them. And I think especially for individuals who are underinsured or not insured at all, it's a very scary thing to think about needing to go to treatment. Some of the insurances, require $5,000 deductibles be met before they could access their treatment services. So that is one thing. Every county in Pennsylvania has a single county authority, and that is our, I want to say, greatest function, where we do help individuals. We pay for treatment, we pay for recovery supports, we're able to pay for sober living in 3/4 way houses. If that 3/4 way house is licensed, back to the policymakers. Policymakers kind of created this now infrastructure that prohibits many people from accessing public dollars because of policy in place. So I think, and the other thing is that I think as everybody in this room, we are at every function, every awareness day, any event that's hosted that potential individuals would have that ability then to reach out for help. So we're all out there letting people know what kind of services are available and that it's okay to reach out for help.
Thank you so much. I want to just touch a little bit on initiatives and strategies. And Sher was talking about how data drives decisions. We know from the data that overdose is down in the white community, but up in the Black community and Hispanic community. And something that she said really just got me thinking. I was thinking about myself as a Black man who identifies as being in recovery. What would it take for me to come to you for your services, right? And a lot of times, as Cheryl spoke to you, we have to take it to the community. And by all means, please, when you come, try to have somebody that looks like me, which, am I making any sense at all?
Yep.
Right? And so when one community suffers, all communities suffers. And when boats are out on the sea and the tide rises, all the boats rise, right? And so we look at that. So thank you, Cheryl, for sharing that. I want to jump over to Scott. Where you at, Scott? You look a little nervous, man. You all right? President accounted for. Okay. Scott, could you speak to the importance of integrating mental health services in the substance use disorder treatment programs? You know, how important is that?
Absolutely. What we want to do is obviously individuals that may have a substance use problem may be trying to address something else that's going on in their life at that point in time. They may be an individual who has experienced symptoms of depression, symptoms of anxiety, some type of life trauma that may have happened to them at that point in time, all the way up to an individual may be experiencing the signs and symptoms of schizophrenia at that point. If we don't address some of those underlying issues at that point in time and help them find the treatment and find the services that are necessary for them to recover and to move forward, they could potentially continue to utilize that harmful substance and continue down that path that will actually make things exponentially worse at that point.
That's awesome. I'm going to stay with you for a minute if it's okay. When we talk about mental health, we know that system to be sometimes reactive and not proactive. So a lot of things actually have to happen. I know that from having a family member with psychotic behavior. He had to do a lot of things before we could get help as a family. So my question on top of what you already answered is, you know, how can an individual manage the immediate health crisis of an individual who's struggling? So what are some things that an individual could do to manage the immediate crisis?
Absolutely. So in Washington County, we have 24-hour, 365-day-a-year, 3 o'clock on Christmas Eve morning type of services. So that would be our crisis.
Oh, say that again. That's impressive. Say that again.
And all the hours. Well, it was spoken earlier because when you work in crisis services, the crisis does not happen between the hours of 8:30 and 5 o'clock, Monday through Friday at that point in time. So it is a 24-hour-a-day program. It is every day of the year. It is on a holiday. It is on somebody's birthday. It is whatever happens at that point in time. So with that, that would be an immediate first step to be able to reach someone who's able to be able to speak with you through our telephone, walk-in, and mobile crisis services. What we do is we want to have an individual there prepared to speak with the individual, identify the problem, identify the key resources and programs that might be able to help them immediately, but then also we want to look at those things that will be possible to develop a service plan going forward in the future. The way that often happens is that, as we've already discussed, some of those symptoms that are experienced mental health symptoms at that point in time, individual tries to address with the use of some type of substance. That's the opportunity where we bring together both the world of drug and alcohol and mental health to be able to address those two things simultaneously at that point in time. That could involve hospitalization, that could involve outpatient treatment, that could involve our crisis stabilization and diversion unit, it can involve utilizing the COE, it could be an individual that's in specialty court, a person who's on probation, a person who's in one of the outpatient programs, somebody who's in some type of a supportive living environment at that point. So it really does encompass everything and addresses the individual wherever the individual is at, whatever the individual needs.
You know, thank you. I have 8 grandsons, and every now and then one of them will say to me, they'll say, "Pat, are you picking up what I'm putting down?" I'm definitely picking up what you're putting down. Well done. So I want to shift a little bit to Judge DeSalle, if I may, and John Ridge. Judge DeSalle, can you share your experience presiding over the treatment courts, right? And how have these courts been successful in reducing recidivism?
We, as I had briefly alluded on, our goal in the treatment court is to identify that problem, whether it's substance use disorder, mental health, or those with alcohol use disorder, and involved in the criminal justice system. And rather than put them in prison and warehouse them, if we could treat that underlying problem and work on that and get them better served and backing out of the system. And, but for that problem, they may not even be in the criminal justice system, and hopefully we will never be in the criminal best practices, we follow those, which are evidence-based practices proven to work. And it has been proven to show that those that are in our program and successful are, we reduce recidivism significantly, where the average recidivism rate is about 40 to 50%. We have less than a third of that now that are recidivating and committing new crimes. And for, of course, not everybody is successful, and even some of those that graduate, we've lost, but we do have a very high success rate in reducing recidivism, returning people to the community, having vibrant, productive members of society, paying off all their fines and costs, having a job, raising their families, where they were, we took them from having no hope at all to getting back in society.
Awesome, awesome. John, I'm going to throw you a curveball. Is that okay?
Sure.
All right, cool. So you are the Washington County Director of Probation Services. Am I correct in saying that?
That's correct.
All right. Okay. It's nice to be on this side. I had to tell you this. When I think back over the years, probation had always been a punitive approach, but it has shifted and made a lot of changes over the years. So my question to you is, what collaborative efforts between the judicial system and treatment programs have been most effective when it comes to supporting an individual in recovery?
Well, I mean, I have to say that problem-solving courts rank number one in my opinion. I was at the ground level for the beginning of Washington County's problem-solving courts. I mean, I was sort of the guinea pig, 2004, during that period, and honestly, I did not want to do it because I saw it as a very social work-oriented thing, and that is not my mindset, especially as a 33-year-old, parole officer. So, when I got into it, we initially did a grant, and we all traveled to Charleston, South Carolina, to observe their problem-solving courts, and it was pretty impactful when you saw the end result of people that had suffered from addiction and had made this, fairly substantial life change at that point in time. Essentially, we saw a graduation. And if you've never seen a problem-solving court graduation, I would urge you to attend, because it will be very moving to you, without a doubt. So, I mean, problem-solving courts is my number one. I mean, for nonviolent, drug-addicted offenders, problem-solving courts is the most impactful. My collaborations with Cheryl Andrews, extend, well past a decade in regards to that networking and finding assistance and help and reaching out for resources. The same with, Scott and I have worked together on the mental health and co-occurring aspects for, well over probably 2 decades at this point in time. Cheryl, Gateway, and Greenbrier, and all those treatment services have been, extremely relevant. But I digress back to your original question and the barrier. I mean, in my world, the barrier is discovering that the individual is actually drug addicted. Because in 32 years, I am sitting here trying to recall at any given time where I supervise an offender, defendant, client, whatever you want to refer to them as, and they came to me and said, hey, John, I'm using and I need help. It doesn't happen that way in my world. It's more of a, I have to discover that you're using type of a situation, because they are not going to come and tell the probation or parole officer I'm using. I mean, there is always that aspect that the probation or parole officer can remove their liberty interest, which of course is not what they want to happen. So in my world, it's usually compelling the individual to actually initiate that treatment. And we do that through stopping the behavior in the moment, which unfortunately is generally through a short term of incarceration, and then relying on these individuals, many of who are sitting at this table, to do the expert assessment on that individual and then recommend the level of treatment. So, yeah.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Somewhere along the course of the journey in recovery, it shifts from being arrested to being rescued, you know, and so I can appreciate what you shared. I want to jump over, and I'm just jumping all over the place, but the faith base, right? I want to talk to you, Tim. Can I talk to you for a minute?
That'd be great. Thank you, sir.
You're very welcome, sir. So, how does faith-based recovery play a role when it comes to supporting individuals through their addiction and on their recovery journey? How does faith-based recovery play a role?
We are spiritual beings, so all of the medical, all of the physical, all of that is critically important. But we can't forget that we are also spiritual beings. And, you know, part of what gets you to that spot, I think it's certainly the way I heard some of Becky's story this morning, an amazing story, is there was so much loss at such a young age, and she was, you know, immature and not able to deal with it. That's spiritual loss, and so I think it's as basic as that. And I want to, I guess I just speak to the treatment as well. I also work in mission field, so the lens that I see the world through is Matthew 25, where Jesus says, when you did for the least of my brothers, you did for me. What you all do in this room day in and day out for people that are in addiction and for their families is treating Jesus at his least. And it's just critically important work. So I'm not sure if I answered your question.
You did, and you did it very well. We know that there's multiple pathways of recovery. One thing that I've seen over the course of my journey, 33 plus more years on this pathway, is that no matter what pathway, and I've experienced a lot of different ones, and some of them I just try, right? But one thing that they all had in common was a spiritual aspect to them. And I think that's the separation between the marathon and the sprint, you know. And I know specifically for the Black community, faith-based approaches is one of those approaches that really get the Black community's attention. So you notice I refer to the Black community a lot? Y'all's crazy. All right. All right, let's keep it moving. I want to come back to you, Cheryl. Andrew. All right. Could you just talk a little bit about how, you know, you mentioned policies earlier, and so how can local governments and commissions support recovery initiatives more effectively, particularly in rural areas,
I think in Washington County, we have a very good representation of grassroots efforts as far as recovery community organizations. So where, you know, the bigger organizations that address needs may be missing some people because they don't feel comfortable in that area, that is a good resource for our communities. And in the same breath, though, I would say that a lot of these grassroots efforts don't fall under regulation and don't maybe aren't monitored or that type of thing. So that could be a plus or that could be a negative. So I think as policymakers, if we can be looking at an entire infrastructure from, you know, here to here, and how does that all intermix? How can the dollars be best spent that we're not duplicating services and, you know, providing the same thing here and over there, but kind of spreading that wealth and knowledge around so that it can be more collaborative and kind of allowing individuals to go anywhere, and we're all kind of providing the same message. This is how you get help. So, I don't know if I fully answered your question, but.
You did, you
Okay.
did. Thank you so much. It's been some time since I've seen you.
I
It's
know,
been a very
I know,
long-
and I didn't get to like say hello when you went
Well,
down.
you can say it now.
Okay.
You can say it.
Hi, it's been a long time.
All right. Dr. Ashley Adams, I'm going to come back to you because I'm going to give you an opportunity to project your voice so that everybody can hear you. If you could, how does your medical approach to treating substance use disorder intersect with behavioral health strategies?
Thank you for the question. So we know that substance use disorder and mental health, behavioral health are very, very closely intertwined. They really can't be separated from each other. I actually find that that is one of our biggest challenges when we are treating opioid use disorder, that many of our patients come to us, of course, with full diagnosis. And also one of the biggest resource challenges that we have is getting patients connected to that care. As an OUD provider, I have found, treating patients with buprenorphine or Suboxone, that when patients have been on this medication for a long time and oftentimes come to us with untreated mental health diagnoses, that they sometimes will replace, that lack of care for their mental health diagnoses with the medication that they do have, which sometimes is the buprenorphine. And in their prior, history, before they may have come to us for treatment, they may have been doing the same thing with an illicit drug. So lack of access to mental health treatment is a huge problem. Like I said, one of our biggest referral issues in the community is to the mental health providers. We do have really great care managers, which is kind of like a social worker within our system, that do know our communities very well, and they do make those connections. Unfortunately, what I will say is that sometimes when we do make those referrals for our patients, they'll be looking at a 3 to 6 month waiting list to actually be connected to a provider that would prescribe for them. So we do try to make, some interventions to help our patients in the interim, but it is a very difficult issue. So a couple initiatives that we are looking at within Crossroads, we've actually started a pilot program within our Virginia market that we are trying to bring mental health providers to Crossroads, which is something we're extremely excited about. Like I said, there's no way to separate addiction medicine and mental health. They're so closely connected.
Thank you. Dr. Carrasco, you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Dr. Ashley 100%. It is a barrier that we deal with, and oftentimes seeing patients in the emergency department, are they being seen there for their primary psychiatric problem or their primary addiction problem? And in reality, it's both, right? But then we have to figure out kind of quickly, what's the disposition of our patient? Does this patient need an inpatient psychiatric unit? And in Washington, we're very fortunate we have that, so we can get those patients admitted upstairs, not only dealing with their psychiatric problems, but then their substance use issues. However, where I get, concerned is when those patients are not needing the inpatient treatment, because then I'm relying on all the experts on this panel to make sure they're taking care of those patients once they're discharged. So when I have those patients captive and they're in my department, or they're going upstairs to the BHU unit, I know they're going to get the care. Hearing about it taking months to get certain physicians or medications for these patients, that's a setup for failure, unfortunately. So yes, continue to bring the resources to us, and we'll do the best we can for our patients.
Thank you. This next one is for the panel in general, so anyone can dive in on this one, but I'm interested to hear, how have you seen the landscape of recovery and treatment evolve in recent years? How have you seen the landscape evolve? Anybody?
I'll jump in on this one.
Cheryl, I just saw that look on your face.
Oh, I know, I have an answer.
Go ahead, you jump in.
I would
You jump in, and we'll come down to Cheryl.
So I think over the past few years, one of the most exciting things that we have seen change, and some big changes we've made within Crossroads, was when the MAT Act was introduced. So with outpatient addiction medicine, and specifically buprenorphine providers, what we were previously restricted to with the X waiver was very, very limiting for us. So any of us who practice addiction medicine, for most of us as providers, it was a very part-time job, because with that restriction, we were only allowed to treat between 100 and 250 patients at any given time. And it was really an unnecessary restriction that created a huge barrier to care. So when this legislation finally passed, what it did was it completely eliminated those barriers, and it opened up the doors for providers to become addiction medicine specialists. And that is a huge deal, and it's made a huge difference within Crossroads. So I'm board certified in family practice, but I only practice addiction medicine. And in Crossroads, we really want to make that the standard and make that our model. And we want our providers to be 100% committed to taking care of patients with substance use disorders. And it has made a huge difference in the landscape.
So I know I need to keep this brief, but I think the changes I have seen is, number one, embracing the fact that we're treating a disease, and the acknowledgement that, you know, Becky made reference to this when she spoke, that we could send her away, we could pay for 15 days, or we had limitations. You could only come in for treatment once a year, because the SCA ran out of money in the month of March, and then we couldn't treat anybody. So looking at it from a disease model, and then freeing up the funding to allow funding from the very onset of somebody reaching out and being able to carry that through all the way through the whole continuum of treatment, whether that's inpatient, then halfway, then, you know, outpatient, 3/4, all the way through to recovery. We now have the ability to continue to request more funds in order to follow that person all the way through. Before, it was like circling, chasing your tail. You knew full well that you were not giving the effective dose of treatment that somebody needed and even have an impact or to begin to get well. It takes 30 days for even the cobwebs to begin to clear when someone's beginning their journey in treatment. So I see that at least at the federal level and at the state level, they are releasing money. I think my budget, I think I had, I don't know, very little in my budget when I started at Washington. We are now close to $1 million in just treatment funding that we're funding individuals. So we have a much better likelihood of seeing sustained long-term recovery if we can keep people engaged in treatment. That's where all these peer supports and recovery supports come into play, and then carry them through all the way to the end.
Thank you. Yes.
Patrick, I'm an alcoholic, by the way. And I want to speak to this issue because I have a very long history of recovery. I've been in recovery for 37 years. And I will say it's half of my life. But when I got into recovery in 1987, things were very different. And, you know, I walked into an AA room straight off the street. I didn't go to rehab. I had no idea about rehab. I had not seen or heard about that this was an idea, except for, like, this was for people like Elizabeth Taylor went to rehab, you know, not the ordinary guy, you know. So I didn't go to rehab. The only psych med that I even knew of at that time was Prozac, and I didn't have that. So we didn't have cell phones at that time. So we had to work on our recovery in a little, they gave us a little address book. We had to get people's numbers in that and keep a quarter in our pocket and call them, from payphones. So that's the beginning of my knowledge of this. Now you've heard like what's changed. And also I would say that we have this thing called the dumbing down of America. We also have this thing that we are looking for a pill. We're looking for let's take a pill, fix it, take a pill. And that's where we live now. We want like an instant change to happen. And that's not how it worked for me. And I have trouble looking at people who use all these other things to start their recovery when I didn't do it that way. So I have a barrier with that, and that's my problem. But I would just say that I don't feel we're there yet. I don't feel like we're encouraging people to look inside themselves and be honest. And maybe they can do it. Maybe they can walk into a program and do it. I don't know if we're encouraging them. I feel like we're encouraging them to, we'll find you the money and we'll get you the pill. And I don't know which works. I mean, it all works, but I don't know. I'm sorry, I'm rambling, thanks.
Thank you, thank you. Not for rambling, but thank you for your response. So when we look at, the landscape of things, I was just, and thank you for your responses. I was always, everything's real personal with me, and my lens is clinical, so it just, brain just turns all the time. But one of the biggest things that I've noticed was just that around multiple pathways, right, of recovery and wellness, and those not being available in the late 80s, or early 90s. I remember my treatment plans didn't have nothing about halfway house or no type of assistance. You get out, go to do a 90 and 90, and hopefully you do it or you're going back to jail. That was it, right? But over the course of time, we have all these pathways, and I guess I just want to take a couple seconds to say that all pathways are great. They all are, depending on who the individual is. But what I've seen is this narrative being shaped in a way that it just, we always swing far to the right or far to the left, and the narrative is being shaped around MAT, which is a beautiful pathway for some, and it's only a pathway, right? And so just keeping that, I've seen that happen over the course of years to the point where I felt as though at times when I was in rooms as an avid 12-stepper, that I was a bad guy, man. I mean, and it shouldn't be like that. They're just pathways. Everyone has a right to them, and managing our own stuff around us, right? Because we can be very opinionated, not just the individuals, but us as helpers, right? And he just eloquently spoke to, hey, I see things a certain way. So we have to manage that too. Make sense? All right, I want to wrap this up here, but I just one more question, and this is for everyone. And we're going to start down that end, because I don't want my man coming up to me after this and saying, man, you really spend a lot of time down that end. So we're going to work our way from the far end, and then Cheryl's going to drive it home with some heavy knowledge, and we'll take it there. So I guess in wrapping this up, what is the single most important change that needs to happen in the recovery ecosystem? What is the single most important change that needs to happen in the recovery ecosystem?
I think it was really kind of hit on the head with what was just said here. We all need to work together, as interdisciplinary teams. And as you mentioned, MAT is one pathway. Obviously, I'm a huge advocate for MAT. Before working in the outpatient addiction medicine realm, my background was working as the medical director at the Butler County Prison. So that's how I became introduced to addiction medicine. This was well before there was ever any access to MAT. So as our speaker earlier, Becky, illustrated very well, I was witness to so many patients, on the cold jail cell floor detoxing. And that was, such an eye-opener to me, and that's what really kind of sparked my interest in brought me into this world because I just saw a system that wasn't working. And then I started to see this recidivism happening in this kind of broken cycle. So that's what brought me here. And I've seen such great success working in the MAT field. And I see, you know, this is a wonderful path for so many patients. But I'm also highly supportive of patients who, you know, succeed in their MAT journey and they're ready to quote unquote graduate. And I help many patients do so, you know, through using injectable buprenorphine and help them taper down, you know, when the time is right and they have all those resources around them. So I think, you know, bringing everybody together here today to get to know each other and network and connect and make sure that we're supporting our patients and, you know, our friends and neighbors to whatever that pathway looks like for them is the key.
Thank you all very much. It is a great room to be in, and I greatly appreciate that you've given me a chance to speak a little bit as well. For me, you know, we talked a bit, and deservedly so, about the overlap between mental health and addiction. I'd like to introduce another overlap that we have discovered in some of our work, and I think that it's out there quite a bit. And these universes don't, like, we got to force these universes together, and it's not easy, and we now have lost somebody to the streets again because of this. But there's a particular person that, you know, through our network we've been trying to help that is not only a victim of the substance abuse, but is also, we're really convinced, intellectually disabled. And so we've been trying to bring the IDD community into care as well. And she, you know, as a result, she just has absolutely no impulse control at all. So we've talked a little bit about, in this room today, the possibility when we find her again, we need to get her other services that she doesn't currently have, that she could get from the intellectual development disability community. But also we're thinking about the possibility of trying to get her out into a home that she can't just hop on a bus and go use again, because she has a really, really hard time. So there's basically what I'm saying is there are people that are high functioning and intellectually disabled that find themselves overlapping into this community, and I think they need some specialized care.
Thank you.
My background, in addition to working as PHS as a clinician, and I have a specialty in trauma, and I think when looking at addiction, it runs through the families, and it's something that's passed on. And I think if we focused on treating people's traumas and their families, oftentimes we're always focused on the individual, to really look at the community that they're in and treating people so that they can get through all the things that are preventing them from accessing and feeling that they're part of something bigger.
Thank you.
So it's a great question. I mean, not really sure where to go with this one because there's so many times along that continuum what could be the most important thing. I think with any illness, it's identifying that you have that problem is the first step. So being able to take that first step and identify this. I do wear a different hat. I'm also a councilman of Peters Township, and just recently we were approached at council having our police officers create a police social worker, and just a phenomenal idea because we see patients that are brought to our emergency department for whatever it's their, you know, they were intoxicated, so they were brought there. So having that case where that police officers bring the patient to our department, having a social worker with them, that is just ideal. Like you're getting right to that patient care right now. You're not only treating the patient, that social worker is going to be working with the family. So we're going to be doing that in Peters Township. We've approved to do that for one police social worker. I know in Hampton Township, they started with one. I think they're at 3 now. So it's just an outstanding way to get to those patients in the community and get them the resources they need. So I just want to, especially to any of our police officers, firefighters, EMS, appreciate all the work there. Truly our first responders in this addiction. So thank you.
I think what we do, and like, I started working in this field 10 years ago, and I was a therapist, a counselor, a therapist, I was a tech, I was a patient, and then I was a director, and now I'm in a very large system, UPMC, and now I'm working with Gateway. And across all those different environments, I noticed that, you know, we're trying to walk this line between what our empirical evidence-based treatment is, and then what we know to be almost, from a behavioral health standpoint, to be contraindicated for addiction treatment. So we're treating, and then we're also sometimes enabling. And how do we stay down that middle road? Because so what we're trying to do in Greenbrier, for sure, from a treatment standpoint, and what my vision is for us to have a very vast array of different opportunities for patients to get to where they want to go to. If it involves MAT, it involves MAT. If it involves abstinence-based, it involves abstinence-based. If it involves holistic medicine, it involves holistic medicine. If it involves music, art, whatever it is, I feel like for a long time we were trying to just fit people into a box. And it's important to hold people accountable, but you don't have to sacrifice that individual as an individual for the sake of accountability. And so it's important to hold people accountable, and it's important from a treatment aspect to be that for that person, but it's also important that we support them through their treatment and give them other options. As someone that was in treatment a million times, you get sick of it. You get sick of hearing the same thing over and over again because you know what you need to do and you know what you need to stop doing. People, we hear it all the time. Treatment. I know what I need to do. I'm just going to head out right now. My mom's here to pick me up. I'll see you later. And it's like, do you? Because if you did, why are we having this conversation right now here in treatment again? And my vision would be to say, like, this is your life. This is your opportunity. Here's a whole giant toolbox of things that you can utilize and to continue to work towards that. Because I think we've made a lot of progress in the last few years towards getting to that place. And I think we can go even further, even beyond just medication and just the regular traditional clinical treatment modalities, and into like some even broader ideas of how to get a person back integrated into their life with tangible, legitimate, effective coping skills that don't involve substances.
Thank you. Thank you.
Could you repeat the question?
Yeah. You know what? I'm glad you said that, because I'm standing here and I'm thinking, okay, like, what was the question? So, in your opinion, what is the single most important change that needs to happen in the recovery ecosystem?
Yeah, that goes along with what I was going to answer. So, I'm going to be, I guess, obtuse or something here. We all work in some way. We work with people. We're trying to help people. I try to remember that I'm a human being. I'm a spiritual human being. I'm a flawed human being. I'm not always going to be perfect. I try to remember that the people I'm working with are human, spiritual beings. May not look that way, but they are. And I think that I would like to see us all be able to challenge and influence and model for the idea of self-love. Because I think that's what I view addiction and disease as. It's like the lack of self-love. So, you know, I've shaken some people up and I've said, why don't you love yourself? No, seriously, why don't you love yourself? Can you look in a mirror and say, I love you? Can you do that? You know, that's like something we've all been challenged to do. But, you know, that's what's missing, I feel, in a lot of the work that we do. We've talked a lot of, we sound very clinical sometimes, you know. And I want us to remember that we're humans and that we are trying to give love and help others. Thanks.
All right. Thank you.
Well, I mean, I approached that question from the criminal justice aspect. Housing. I mean, you know, many times we violate somebody. We know there's obviously an addiction issue. We initiate treatment. We initiate, criminal justice aspects for the betterment of that individual. However, we're going to send that individual back to a place to live where we know that the chance of success is unlikely, simply because either family members or associates or partners are actively in use. And so we as a criminal justice system are asking this individual to stay sober as part of a court-ordered requirement, and it's not a good plan. So when I look at it from a straight success or business aspect, I believe that good criminal justice housing could likely increase successes. Something clean, something where that individual may establish pro-social contacts, learn pro-social activities, be able to thrive maybe in employment in the community while not being, tempted or reintroduced to an addictive lifestyle because of partners or family members. I believe that could be very successful if we can get to that place.
Excellent, thank you. So I'm going to come at it from a little bit of a different direction as well. So those of you who have ever trained with me or heard me speak before, I often tell people that we're going to make mistakes, right? We just want to make sure that as an individual, as a community, as a society, we don't make mistakes so large that we can't fix them. So I think that's one big component. The other thing that I talk about a good bit of the time is the willing participant. So I look at some of the people I know and I see a couple heads nodding and so on from there. But what we need are willing participants, and we've identified that. We need a willing participant to identify that they're having a difficulty. We need a willing participant to be able to ask for that assistance, to be able to look for that assistance and guidance to be able to improve their situation at that point in time. We need willing participants from the legal system to be able to look at things differently, knowing that putting somebody in a jail cell or something like that may not address the issue and probably will not address the issue at that point in time. We need for individuals that are here at this table as well as in this audience to come forward and be able to say they want to do something different. They want to look at something that's going to assist individuals to be able to help them progress and be able to help them move forward. So I leave you with this. Can you help us all find willing participants to be able to move forward and address the issues that we're facing in our society right now? Thank you.
This touches on what John Ridge just said, but there has to be this holistic approach to all of our participants that we're treating, and that includes housing, transportation, and vocational training. Unfortunately, our correctional facility has become the default mental health facility and the default detox facility. And we try to engage them as quickly as possible, assess their problem, and figure out a treatment plan, but they may not have a safe, other than an inpatient facility, they may not have a safe, sober place to go. In the interim, while they're waiting a bed for an inpatient bed, or even after the inpatient bed is finished, the inpatient treatment is done, they need a safe and sober place to engage their outpatient therapy. And you have to look at all of that. And of course, Washington struggles, as many rural counties do, with transportation. We don't have a lot of public transportation. If you live in Burgettstown and you need to get into Washington to do your treatment or your drug testing, what have you, that's a problem. And we've got to be able to do all of that. And it is as a community too. We recently had a person who had lost a family member and bought a house in Washington and wanted to convert it to a sober living house, and the community came out and said, we don't want that in our backyard. It's a challenge, and I understand it from both sides of both points of view, but we have to do that holistic approach where we got to look at the whole picture. You can't think that this person will be successful without a safe place to live, without adequate transportation, and without being able to get a job, with having a record, with having those issues, and be able to support themselves and sustain themselves after they're finished with the program.
All
All right,
All
Cheryl,
right,
bring us on,
pressure's on,
Cheryl.
okay. So, I'm losing my voice, don't know why. Excuse me. So, I listened to everyone, they all took my answers. But I think I have two things. One, I think we need to work harder at normalizing harm reduction strategies. People, as we heard from our speaker today, sometimes people don't get it the first time or the second time or the 15th time. And if we don't keep them alive, then we don't have the opportunity to help them find recovery. So normalizing naloxone, normalizing syringe service programs, where when you start engaging communities where they can begin to interact in these types of places, that's when we can open up the treatment options to people and engage them into services. So Dr. Von Zell said that, you know, many of us have views from the very far left and the very far right, and it's kind of hard to find that middle ground. But I really think we need to strive to, we just had a first responder event yesterday, recognizing individuals, first responders who saved lives. We had a speaker, and that speaker said, you know, we get it, we understand. Oh, I'm going back to that same place. I revived that person last week. But those are all opportunities. We never know when that individual is going to be willing and ready. And I will say, even above accepting harm reduction would be showing kindness to the individual. I can't tell you how many stories I've heard about a person deciding to get clean because someone extended respect and kindness. Just, Becky even mentioned that. So I just think when we have that opportunity before us, we should be educated enough to even say, maybe you don't know how to get that person help, but you're going to support them in trying to find what you need to help that person.
Awesome, awesome. I think we should clap to that one. Let's give our panelists a hand in the next job. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Washington County Department of Human Services for allowing me the opportunity to come into your beautiful county and interact with such great people. So, John, you're up.
Thank you again, Dr. Wade. Let's just give one more round of applause to Dr. Wade. Really inspiring opportunities that we had to share this afternoon. I also want to state that one thing that resonated to me with Judge LaSalle, as well as John Ridge stating really channeling holistic supports, and that's something that as the Director of Human Services, I want to really vouch to commit those opportunities and supports and resources to our recovery community. So again, on behalf of the Human Service Division, we really want to continue these efforts as we move forward together. That being stated, a few closing notes I want to make note of. On your tables, you will find Good Kids Gone Bad, authored by Joseph Maxim. This is a faith-based, rooted discovery and journey, something that I would encourage you to take a look at and read, especially in regards to dreams and discovering passions, especially for our youth, something that, again, resonated for me. Also, on your tables, you will find a notebook, journal, and certainly for those that are in the recovery walk know the importance of journaling. And hopefully today you can take some real resounding discussion points that we shared to continue to support your walks and the community's walks in recovery. That being said, I just want to thank everyone for attending this afternoon. It was a lovely day. We appreciate everyone taking part. We look forward to doing this again sometime soon. So thank you so much. Have a good afternoon.